Why you never fit in. Have you ever walked into a room full of people and felt alone? Not because you were ignored, but because somewhere deep inside you knew you did not belong? This isn't by accident. You were not made to blend in. You were set apart, not for punishment, but for purpose. Not because you're broken, but because you're being built. If you've ever asked, why do I feel so different? Why is my path so lonely? Why me? Then maybe, just maybe, you weren't meant to be part of the crowd, because you were chosen to lead it. Welcome to Chill, Then Conquer. You were not dropped into this world by chance. There is a design behind your life, a quiet, sacred pattern stitched together before your first breath. And within that pattern is a calling, a mission, something only you can fulfill. But most never hear it. Why? Because the world is noisy, loud enough to drown the whisper of your truth. And most people follow the crowd, not because it's right, but because it's easy. You weren't built for easy. Your soul didn't come here for average. There's a reason your road feels different, and that reason is divine. You were not called to fit in. You were called to remember who you are, to remember why you came, to remember that you were sent, not simply born. Most people think loneliness is a sign that something's wrong, but for the chosen, it's the first sign that something sacred is happening. You see, isolation is not exile. It's a sanctuary. The quiet you fear is the place you're meant to hear. The silence isn't empty, it's full of instruction. You weren't cut off from the world, you were carved out of it, pulled aside, not to be forgotten, but to be fortified. Because if your mission is rare, then your preparation must be private. You've been wondering why you can't connect like others, why their parties feel empty, why small talk exhausts you, why crowds make you shrink instead of expand. It's not weakness, it's spiritual protection. Because what you carry is sacred, and sacred things are never left exposed. Here's something you've felt, but maybe never had words for. You vibrate differently, and most of the world doesn't. That's why you feel the friction, that invisible tension between you and the masses, the misunderstanding, the misalignment, the misfit feeling. It's not your imagination. The truth is, when your soul operates at a different frequency, you repel what's not meant for you. It's not about being better, it's about being tuned to a different signal. You feel what others don't. You see through what others accept. You're awake in a world that is mostly asleep. And that can feel like a curse, but it's the mark of the chosen. You can't fake belonging when your spirit knows the difference. Have you ever noticed how certain environments drain you? How some conversations feel like poison? How just being near certain people leaves you feeling dimmed? That's not your sensitivity. That's your soul's armor doing its job. Chosen ones walk with a spiritual armor, not made of steel, but of energy. You're not here to absorb everything. You're here to protect the fire within you. And so you're kept away from places that would dilute you, kept distant from people who carry chaos, not because you're antisocial, but because your spirit is in training. What you carry is not meant to be leaked, entertained, or wasted. It is meant to be guarded, sharpened, and eventually unleashed. You are not fragile, you are focused, and your solitude is not your weakness. It's your strength in disguise. If you have ever felt the sharp ache of standing alone, if you've looked around and realized there was no one walking beside you, know this: true leaders are born in loneliness. This world has a twisted idea of leadership. It tells you a leader is the loudest voice, the one who commands the crowd, who stands in the spotlight, who has followers trailing behind their every move. But the truth is simpler and so much more powerful. Real leadership begins when you learn to lead yourself, when there is no one to cheer you on, no one to push you forward, no one to tell you to keep going. Only the quiet, steady beat of your own heart, and the silent promise you make to yourself, I will keep walking, even alone. Because before you can lead others, you must survive your own doubts. Before you can light a path for the world, you must learn to see in your own darkness. Before you can inspire strength, you must build it inside yourself when every voice tells you to quit. The loneliness you feel is not a prison, it's a forge. Every moment you spend in silence is a hammer strike shaping your soul, crafting the resilience you will need for when your time comes. Every evening you spend wondering if you should keep trying is a seed planted deep in your heart, growing roots that will one day anchor you when the storms come. Every morning you get up, despite the fear of failure, despite the weight of your past, despite the emptiness around you. That is leadership. Not the kind with medals and applause, but the kind that changes lives. Because here's a secret: when you finally stand in the place you were meant to reach, people will see your strength, but they will never know your nights of loneliness. They will hear your words, but they will never feel the hours you spent doubting them. They will watch you shine, but they will never imagine how many times you nearly gave up. That is the unseen side of every true leader. That is the hidden chapter the world never reads. So if you find yourself alone, if you wonder why your phone stays silent, why your victories go unnoticed, why your battles are fought in the dark, don't curse the loneliness, honor it, because it is the training ground of the chosen. The quiet night is where leaders are made. The empty room is where courage is born. The unshared tears are where empathy is woven. Every great voice in history once spoke only to themselves. Every warrior of light once stood trembling in shadows. Every healer of hearts once cried alone in the dark. Your loneliness is not a punishment. It is proof that you are being prepared for a mission bigger than yourself. And here's what the world forgets. People only follow those who have first learned to stand alone. Because when you have carried yourself through the valley, you can carry others to the mountaintop. So next time the silence scares you, breathe it in like sacred air, because this silence is carving space in your soul for the kind of wisdom only solitude can give. One day, when your voice carries hope to those who are lost, they will not know what it cost you. They will only know that someone appeared who understood their pain. Someone who knows what it means to stand alone and still choose to keep walking. That someone is you. The weight you carry is your gift. There is a strange truth the world rarely speaks. The heaviest things we carry are often the ones that make us. The burdens, the disappointments, the secrets, the invisible weight that no one else sees. That is your gift disguised. It doesn't feel like a gift, does it? Some days you wake up already tired, not because your body is weak, but because your soul is carrying too much. You smile in front of others, but inside you're holding back storms. You show up every day, but part of you wonders why. Why does it have to be this hard? Why does it seem like others float while you fight just to breathe? But let me tell you something the world won't. You were never meant to float. You were built to carry. You were born for depth, not comfort. You weren't sent here to have an easy life. You were sent here to forge something eternal out of the fire of your own struggle. Yes, your weight is heavy. Yes, your path is steep. But look at what it's building in you. Endurance, compassion, insight, unshakable strength. The pain you carry today is the wisdom you'll give tomorrow. The weight that threatens to break you is shaping your hands into instruments of healing. You don't need to drop the weight to be free. You need to understand it. Because not all pain is punishment. Sometimes pain is initiation, a rite of passage. And those who endure it in silence, who keep walking despite it, who don't curse the sky when it rains, those are the ones who rise. You are not behind. You are being refined. Your slow progress is not failure, it's foundation. What you carry now may feel like a curse, but it will become the source of your greatest power. The man who has never suffered cannot guide the suffering. The woman who has never been broken cannot teach others how to rebuild. The soul that has never been crushed by silence cannot understand the voice of those who live in it. Your scars are not shame. They are scripture. They are the ancient markings of someone who was chosen to go deeper. Don't wish it away. You weren't made for the shallow end. You were made for oceans. And the oceans don't give themselves easily. They test the ones they call. So if life feels heavier than usual, if you feel like you're walking uphill while others are gliding, maybe you're not doing it wrong. Maybe you're being chosen. Chosen to carry light into the dark. Chosen to hold the line when others drop it. Chosen to become someone others can lean on because you know what it means to feel the weight. The world is full of people pretending to be strong, but you're becoming strong for real. So don't envy the ones who never had to suffer. They will never know what you know. They will never feel what you feel. They will never understand the deep, sacred resilience of someone who kept going, with weight on their back and fire in their chest. Your burden has meaning. Your story has weight. And when the day comes that you speak, your words will not just be sound, they will be medicine. Because they come from someone who carried their transformation through the wilderness and never put it down. Your silence is not emptiness, it's becoming. They'll misunderstand you now. Let them. They'll say you're cold, distant, that you've changed, and they'll be right, you have. But they will not understand why. Because the change they speak of didn't begin outside. It began in the quiet. When you stopped talking, when you stopped explaining, when you stopped begging for someone to see you. Silence isn't what they think it is. It's not the absence of voice. It's the presence of becoming. You are not running away. You are returning inward. You are pulling your soul back from the places it scattered. You are retreating not to hide, but to forge. They think silence means weakness, but silence is where the strongest rebuild. It's where you hear your own voice again, unfiltered, undiluted, unbroken. There was a time you gave your energy to noise, to fixing what could not be fixed, to proving your worth, to convincing people who had already chosen to misunderstand you. But now you've gone silent, not as surrender, but as sovereignty. Because sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. No response, no defense, no explanation. You're not trying to win arguments anymore. You're not trying to be liked. You're not trying to make everyone comfortable with your truth. Because your truth doesn't need to be dressed up. It doesn't need to be watered down. It doesn't need applause. You've finally understood. You don't owe the world your noise. You owe it your clarity. And clarity doesn't come from chaos. It comes from stillness. This silence you're in, it's not empty. It's sacred. You're building something the world can't see yet. You're gathering your power like a storm just before it breaks. You're listening to the voice beneath all voices, to the one that whispers, "Let them go. Let it burn. Let what must die, die, so that you may finally live." Silence isn't retreat. It's preparation. You are not disappearing. You are distilling, filtering out the lies, releasing the noise, becoming precise in a world addicted to distraction. And when you emerge from this, you will not be loud. You will be clear, not aggressive, but undeniable. Because people don't follow noise, they follow weight. And silence adds weight to a man. A man who can hold his tongue can hold the world. A woman who no longer justifies is already free. So, stay quiet, not out of fear, but out of fury transformed into focus. Stay quiet, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned when to say it, and when to let the silence speak louder than words ever could. You are not gone. You are gathering. And when it's time, they won't recognize you. Because silence didn't erase you. It revealed you, the real you, the one who no longer needs to be understood to walk in power, the one who finally knows. Your silence is not emptiness. It is the sound of a soul becoming whole. You're no longer there, and that's your power. They'll come looking. Too late. too loud, too desperate. They'll ask where you went, why you're so quiet, why you don't respond the way you used to, why their presence no longer shakes your ground. But here's the truth. You didn't vanish. You transcended. There is no revenge. There is no dramatic exit. No final message. Just stillness. Like a temple that closed its doors when it realized not everyone who entered was sacred. You don't burn bridges anymore. You simply stop crossing them. Silently, without fire, without fury. Because you've learned the most powerful departure is the one that makes no sound. Only absence. They wanted your attention. Now they can't have your presence. They wanted your fire. Now they sit in the cold. Because you outgrew the need to be seen. You no longer perform pain for applause. You've stopped playing in arenas where your worth is debated. You've moved on. And they won't understand it, because most people think power is loud. But the most untouchable ones move in quiet waves.
You're not reachable because you no longer operate on that frequency. You've changed your spiritual address. And when they knock now, there's no answer. Not because you're ignoring them, but because you're not there anymore. You've gone beyond needing closure, beyond needing to explain, beyond needing to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. You don't belong to that version of yourself who waited for replies. You don't serve the same gods you used to. Approval, attention, validation. No. Now you kneel at the altar of peace. Now you rise with the strength of restraint. Now you walk with the dignity of someone who doesn't need to be chased, because you've already arrived where they cannot follow. Let them wonder. Let them scroll. Let them type and delete. Let them feel the echo of your absence, because silence is no longer your strategy. It is your state. Not a tactic to be seen, but a territory you now live in. You no longer react. You respond to yourself first, and that's why they can't reach you. You no longer explain. You embody, and that's why they don't recognize you. You no longer ask why they did what they did. You ask what part of you allowed it, and that's how you've healed. You've become so rooted in yourself that their storm can't move you anymore. So full of clarity that their confusion no longer tempts you back. So deeply anchored that their chaos can't pull you in again. You didn't disappear. You elevated. And those who were never meant to ascend with you simply fell away. This is your final form, unreachable. Not because you're hiding, but because you've mastered what they never will. The art of walking away without leaving hate behind. No residue, no revenge, just resolve. Because you know now, not everyone deserves access. Not every voice deserves an answer. Not every door must stay open. So you close them, softly, firmly, for the last time. The summit is silent. That's why so few arrive. There are no crowds at the top, no applause, no noise. Just wind, just sky, just stillness. You've walked through fire, carried betrayal in your bones, held your own breath through nights where silence screamed louder than words. And still, you climbed. Not to prove them wrong, not to be seen, but to be free. Now look where you stand. No longer begging for love. No longer auditioning for respect. No longer lowering your voice so others can feel taller. You speak less, but every word has weight. You show up less, but your absence teaches more. You give less, but what you give is clean, whole, and untouchable. They think you became cold. No, you became clear. The fog of emotional chaos burned off, and you saw things for what they were. That not everyone who calls it love means it. That not everyone who smiles holds peace in their heart. That not every connection deserves to be kept alive. So you let it die, without mourning, without blaming, just releasing. Because when you stop chasing what leaves, you make space for what stays. You've mastered one of life's rarest arts, the discipline of emotional distance. Not because you hate, but because you finally love yourself enough not to bleed for those who wouldn't even bandage you. You used to react. Now you observe. You used to beg. Now you build. You used to doubt. Now you decide. They say you've changed. They're right, because no one climbs and comes back the same. You gave your heart once. Now you give your boundaries. You used to speak your pain. Now you speak your power. You used to wait for the storm to pass. Now you are the calm after it. The summit is not crowded because it requires sacrifice, of comfort, of company, of being understood, and you gave them all, willingly. For what? For the one thing they couldn't give you, yourself. At this height, you see clearly who was real and who was just loud, who loved you and who needed you for survival, who stayed when the fire dimmed and who ran when you turned silent. You don't blame them. They were never built for the climb. This is your silence now. Not the silence of pain, but the silence of having nothing left to prove. You don't announce your growth, you embody it. You don't need their approval, you carry your own. You don't chase closure, you are the closure. You don't lower your light, you build a life that only those who shine can enter. So now you walk alone, not because no one chose you, but because you chose not to be available for anything less than sacred. And that is where the real journey begins. The man who rebuilt himself in silence. You were broken. Not shattered in a loud cinematic way, but slowly, quietly, like a rope fraying fiber by fiber, beneath the weight of unseen burdens. They didn't notice. No one ever does. Because the world doesn't pay attention until you collapse. But you never gave them that satisfaction. You collapsed inward, not out of weakness, but strategy. You disappeared to rebuild, not to run. While they danced in noise, you became the architect of your own stillness. While they posted, you practiced. While they sought attention, you sought alignment. And now, you return, not as who you were, but as someone they no longer recognize. Not because you became someone else, but because you finally remembered who you were before the world told you to forget. The man who now walks with a slower pace but heavier presence. The man who no longer explains himself because his life is the explanation. You wear no armor because you've become the sword. You seek no revenge because your success is silence served cold. They wonder what happened. They whisper, "Why is he so distant, so hard to read, so unaffected?" The truth? You're not cold. You're just done bleeding for people who only knew how to cut. This is the real power. Not fame, not wealth, but being unreachable to the chaos that once controlled you. Her silence, it used to break you. Now it amuses you. Their games, they used to haunt your sleep. Now they don't even register. Why? Because you no longer live in the same realm. You didn't just grow. You outgrew. Outgrew needing to be chosen. Outgrew over-explaining. Outgrew proving you're enough. You've seen too much, felt too deeply, lost too hard, to ever let small minds occupy big spaces in your soul again. Now, you guard your energy like a sacred temple. You give nothing to confusion. You invest in clarity. You entertain no one who dances in and out of your life like a shadow. You're done with ghosts. They may knock, but the door they once had access to doesn't exist anymore. Because here's the truth they'll never say out loud. When you stop responding, you stop being manipulated. When you stop chasing, you stop being toyed with. When you stop needing, you become free. And now, your silence isn't about her, or them, or the past. It's about something much deeper. Sovereignty. Of your mind, of your emotions, of your spirit. You no longer react, you realign. You no longer explain, you embody. You no longer chase, you channel. This is not the version of you they thought would survive. It's the version that was born after you died to everything you once thought you needed. The old you needed closure. The new you is the closure. The old you wanted peace. The new you is peace. So if they come back, with apologies, nostalgia, or new tactics, just remember, the man you are now was forged in silence, refined by distance, and reborn in solitude.
And if you've come this far, brother of the flame, this isn't the end. It's the threshold, the point where you choose not to return to who you were, but to walk further into who you're meant to be. Subscribe if you felt the fire of betrayal, but chose to rise instead of react. Stay with us, because in the next phase, we go beyond silence, beyond self-reconstruction, and into the final mastery of emotional invincibility. You're no longer healing, you're leading. Welcome to the summit. Now let's build the kingdom that no storm can shake.